Have you ever gone through a season where it felt like the math of your life just stopped adding up? You have a surgery, so you expect 6 weeks of recovery. Or you lose someone you love, so you expect a few months of sadness. We have these timelines in our heads.
Right. We treat recovery like a linear equation. Input, rest, output, healing.
Exactly. But then there are those times where the math fails. You're 6 months past the surgery or the loss, and you aren't bouncing back. You're actually sinking deeper. You're not just tired, you're numb. You're not just sad, you're physiologically stalled.
That stall is what we need to talk about today. Because for a specific group of people, those living with adrenal insufficiency, and honestly for anyone dealing with chronic illness, that failure to bounce back isn't a failure at all. It's a mechanism.
We are looking at an article from My Adrenal Life titled When Grief, Trauma, and Illness Stack. It covers a phenomenon that feels invisible but weighs a ton, the cumulative impact of loss plus surgery plus chronic illness. And Alex, the central metaphor here is the stack. It's not just one thing happening after another.
No, it's everything happening on top of everything else. The article describes it as a season where grief, trauma, and illness overlap. But the crucial part is that for someone with primary or secondary adrenal insufficiency, this isn't just an emotional overlap. It is a metabolic collision. Your body does not separate emotional stress from physical stress. To your HPA axis, it all looks like the same expensive bill coming due.
Let's break that down, because the HPA axis sounds like something from a biology textbook that most of us forgot. Why is that the centerpiece of this conversation?
The HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, is your body's command center for stress. Think of it as the thermostat and the furnace. When the brain perceives a threat, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenals, to release cortisol. Now, in a healthy person, if you get the flu, or you have surgery, or you lose a parent, your body automatically floods the system with extra cortisol. It's the fuel that stabilizes your blood pressure and manages inflammation, so you can survive the crisis.
So, cortisol isn't just the stress hormone in a bad way. It's the survival hormone.
Precisely. It is life-critical. It regulates blood sugar, blood pressure, and heart function. Now, imagine you have adrenal insufficiency, or AI. Your furnace is broken. You cannot produce that cortisol surge on demand. You are dependent on cortisol replacement medication just to stay alive at a baseline. So when a massive stressor hits, like surgery, you are operating with a deficit that a healthy body never experiences.
The article mentions this concept of stacking. It's not just that you have AI, it's that you have AI, and then you have surgery, and then perhaps you are grieving a loss. How does the body process that stack?
It processes it as an overwhelming threat load. Let's look at the surgery component first. We tend to think of surgery as a scheduled, controlled event. We rationalize it mentally. But your body doesn't know a surgeon is trying to help you. Your body sees a knife. It perceives catastrophic tissue damage. As noted in research on surgical stress responses, this triggers a massive inflammatory cascade. In a healthy person, cortisol rushes in to put out that fire. In an AI patient, without precise medical management, often called stress dosing, that fire burns unchecked. That drains the system.
And then you add grief on top of that. I think this is where society gets it wrong. We think of grief as sitting in a chair and crying. We think of it as mental. But the article is adamant. Grief is stress. Grief is inflammation.
It is physically exhausting. The National Institutes of Health and various studies on bereavement show that grief suppresses the immune system and increases systemic inflammation. It is a high-calorie activity for your brain and body. So, if you are recovering from surgery, your body is trying to knit tissue back together. That requires energy. If you are also grieving, your nervous system is processing profound loss. That requires energy. If you have adrenal insufficiency, you are already running on a finite battery. You don't have the reserves to fund all three of those accounts at once.
So what happens when the checks bounce? When you simply cannot pay the energy bill for all these stressors?
You enter what the article calls protection mode. This is fascinating because it explains behavior that often looks like depression or laziness, but is actually a survival strategy. The nervous system shifts out of fight or flight and into freeze.
Freeze. Like a deer in headlights?
Similar, but more chronic. In polyvagal theory, this is the dorsal vagal shutdown. Fight or flight is active, it requires mobilization and adrenaline, but if the body perceives that the threat is too great, or that it lacks the resources to fight, which is literally true in adrenal insufficiency because you lack the cortisol to fuel the fight, it drops into a conservation state. You go numb, you get brain fog, you withdraw. It's not that you won't move, it's that your biology has decided that moving is too expensive.
That reframes the entire experience. The article lists symptoms like extreme fatigue that feels heavier than a flare, or strange numbness. If you're the patient, you're sitting there thinking, I'm broken, I'm failing at recovery, I should be better by now. But you're saying this is actually the body working correctly, like a laptop going into power saving mode because the battery is at 4%.
Exactly, it is a functional shutdown. It feels terrible, but it is your nervous system trying to keep you alive by reducing your output. The problem is, in our culture, we moralize recovery. We praise the person who battles back quickly. We look at the person who is numb and slow, and we think they aren't trying hard enough.
Which brings us to the caregivers. This piece had a specific section for them, noting that they might see their loved one become more withdrawn or changed. That has to be scary. You see someone you love effectively disappear behind a wall of numbness.
It's terrifying for caregivers. They might see irritability or an inability to make simple decisions. The article mentions reduced tolerance for noise. That's a classic sign of a nervous system that is at capacity. If you are stacking grief, surgery, and illness, your sensory processing bucket is full. The sound of the TV or a question about what to have for dinner can cause a meltdown because there is literally no processing power left to handle it.
So if you are the caregiver, the advice isn't to push them to snap out of it.
No, that would be like asking a car with no gas to drive faster. The advice is to recognize that this personality shift is a symptom of the stack. It's temporary, but only if the system gets the safety and time it needs to recalibrate. The article uses that word specifically, recalibration, not just recovery.
I like that distinction. Recovery implies getting back to where you were. Recalibration implies that the baseline has moved.
And it has. When you stack trauma, your baseline for safety moves. Your body becomes more vigilant. For someone with adrenal insufficiency, the margin for error is razor thin. They might need more medication, again under a doctor's supervision during this time, because the grief is consuming their cortisol just as much as the surgery did.
It's interesting you mention the medication aspect. The article lists different types of adrenal insufficiency: primary, secondary, tertiary, and iatrogenic. Does the stack affect them differently, or is the mechanism the same?
The mechanism of the cortisol gap is similar, but the context changes. Primary AI, or Addison's disease, means the adrenal glands themselves are destroyed. They can't make cortisol or aldosterone. Secondary and tertiary are issues with the pituitary or hypothalamus signaling. Iatrogenic is steroid-induced, often from taking prednisone for other conditions. But here's the unifier. In all these cases, the automatic stress response is broken. So whether the cause is autoimmune or a pituitary tumor, the danger of the stack is the same. The body screams for more fuel to handle the grief and surgery, and the tank is empty.
There's a line in the text that really hit me. A gentle setback after loss or surgery is not a moral failure. It feels like we need to print that on a billboard. Why do we equate health stability with virtue?
Because control is our favorite illusion. We want to believe that if we do everything right, eat the right food, take the meds, think positive thoughts, we will be rewarded with health. When you have a chronic illness like AI, that illusion is shattered daily. You can do everything right and still crash because a virus walked into the room. When you add the uncontrollability of grief, it's destabilizing. The stack strips away the illusion of control.
Let's talk about the way out, or rather, the way through. The article mentions that healing in these layered seasons moves slowly. If you're in that freeze state, that numbness, how do you signal to your nervous system that it's safe to come back online?
You can't force it. That's the paradox. If you try to force your nervous system to mobilize before it's ready, you just add more stress to the stack. You have to lower the demand. This means radical rest. And I don't mean just sleeping. I mean sensory rest. Turning off the news, reducing decision fatigue, letting the house be messy. You have to prove to your HPA axis that the threat level has dropped.
That is so hard to do when the world demands you move on, especially with grief. Employers give you, 3 days? Then you're back. But your body is still in that inflammatory state for months.
Years, sometimes. The data on bereavement shows physiological markers of stress can remain elevated for a significant time. For the AI patient, this means the season of the stack might last a year or more, and that has to be okay. The article validates this heaviness. It says, heaviness is not a verdict. It is a signal.
A signal that you are carrying a heavy load. It seems simple, but acknowledging the weight is the first step.
It stops the gaslighting. When you understand the physiology, when you understand that your cortisol is low, your cytokines are high, and your nervous system is in a dorsal vagal freeze, you stop hating yourself for being tired. You stop thinking, I'm lazy. You start thinking, I am biologically overwhelmed and I am doing a good job just by existing right now.
That shift from self-judgment to self-compassion seems like the ultimate recalibration.
It is. And for the caregivers listening, that is the most powerful thing you can offer. You don't need to fix their fatigue. You just need to sit with them in the freeze and say, it makes sense that you are tired. You are carrying a mountain.
We always want to fix it. We want to cheerlead. But sometimes the cheerleader is just another loud noise.
Exactly. Silence and presence are often the only things a stacked nervous system can tolerate.
So if we look at the big picture of this article, it's really a permission slip. Permission to be slow. Permission to be numb. Permission to not be okay while the layers are stacking up.
And permission to respect the biology of your own body. We aren't machines. We are biological organisms that require safety to function. When the safety is gone, through loss, through trauma, through the knife of surgery, we have to wait for it to return. We cannot hustle our way out of a biological freeze.
That is a profound place to land. Alex, thank you for unpacking the biology behind this heavy emotional experience. It makes the invisible load feel a lot more tangible.
My pleasure. It's an important conversation.
If you know someone living with chronic illness or someone navigating a heavy season of loss, send this episode to them. Sometimes just knowing there's a biological reason for the heaviness is the relief they need.